John Tvedtnes is Senior Resident Scholar at the BYU Institute for the Study and Preservation of Ancient Religious Texts. He earned a BA in Anthropology, a Graduate Certificate in Middle Eastern Area Studies, an MA in Linguistics, and an MA in Hebrew at the University of Utah, and did postgraduate work at the University of California, Berkeley, and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He taught for 17 years at the University of Utah and the Salt Lake and Jerusalem Centers of Brigham Young University. He has published 9 books and more than 200 articles. While many of his writings have appeared in books, magazines, and journals for the Latter-day Saint audience, some of his works have been published by the University of Utah, the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, the Pontifical Biblical Institute, and the Journal of Near Eastern Studies. Among other publications, he has written for Farms Review and the Journal Book of Mormon Studies. There's a lot more you could read in his bio, but without any further introduction, I'm going to turn the time over to John Tvedtnes.
Since they're short on pens, I'll return the one you gave me, if you need pens back there. For those of you who don't know me, I am Dan Peterson's warm-up act. He'll be up here in a short while, too. If Marvin's around and can hear me, I was in the hallway last time I saw him. None of us felt guilty about those things that the presidents of the church have said in the past. And the reason for that is that 2 years ago, Renee just wiped all of our sins away. She absolved us of guilt over the black issue. So we just don't have that feeling anymore. I hope I'm going to be able to read in this dim light. My topic is over here to the right, as well as the correct spelling of my name, because I'm the one who did it.
If we do put this like this, you have a little bit of light.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, no, it isn't. It's worse. Over the last century, a number of scholars have looked at names and other transliterated words in the Book of Abraham and in the Kirtland Egyptian papers in an attempt to determine their authenticity. In some cases, it can be demonstrated that the name is actually attested in ancient Near Eastern documents. For unattested names, it is sometimes possible to postulate an etymology based on known words in Egyptian and other ancient languages in use in the time of Abraham. While I can claim credit for some of the work contained in my presentation today, it is appropriate to acknowledge that I have drawn upon research by various others, such as Hugh Nibley, A. Richards Durham, Robert F. Smith, John Gee, and John M. Lundquist. Indeed, one of the most thorough researchers of the Book of Abraham onomasticon is Robert F. Smith, most of whose contribution is embodied in a series of unpublished manuscripts that he shared with me during the 1960s and 70s. I've mentioned some of his research in previous publications. I must acknowledge, however, that I've added my own contributions, and I'm the only one who can really be faulted for any mistakes here. One of the primary sources of the names used in this study is, of course, the Book of Abraham, as published in our Pearl of Great Price. These names have been carefully compared with the forms as found in the 4 extant handwritten manuscripts of the Book of Abraham, one of which you see on the left here, that's held in the LDS Church Archives. Joseph Smith's explanation to the facsimiles published with the Book of Abraham, though not part of the text itself, are another source of names. The third source comprises various handwritten documents prepared in Joseph Smith's day and known collectively as the Kirtland Egyptian Papers. There are 10 such documents, and some of them are multi-page. This includes the notebook entitled Grammar and Alphabet of the Egyptian Language, a smaller handmade notebook called Valuable Discovery of Hidden Records, and another notebook entitled FGW and William, standing evidently for Frederick G. Williams and probably William Wines Phelps, along with other loose sheets, a few of which comprise Egyptian texts copied by one or more of the scribes, but with no English commentary at all. This is something that John Gee loves because he can work with those. Some of the latter include material copied from papyri that are not currently extant. Because they provide no information on names, they are excluded from this present study. Some of the names that interest us relate to ancient Egypt itself and to people who were among the earliest rulers thereof. Abraham chapter 1 verse 23 and 25 notes that the founder of Egypt was a daughter of Noah's son Ham named Egyptus. It has long been noted that in the earliest handwritten manuscripts, the name is written Zeptah, which you can see here. As A. Richards Durham noted some years ago, both forms derive from one of the Egyptian names for the capital city of Lower Egypt, Memphis, which was Chet-Kaptah, if you don't put in the right vowels, meaning the residence of the spirit of Ptah. The name appears even in that form on an Ugaritic tablet. When the Greeks came to Egypt in the time of Alexander the Great, they had to modify the name in order to pronounce it in their own language. Greek had no sound, so they simply dropped the consonant at the beginning and the end of the name itself. The T had already been dropped from the end of the word for residence, which is how it is in Coptic. It's A, often the feminine ending dropped off of those in later forms of the Egyptian language. Instead of unvoiced K, the Greeks used its voiced equivalent, the G sound, G. Finally, they added the masculine singular suffix os. This gave them the form Aegyptos, which became Aegyptus in Latin. And this is the origin, of course, of the name Egyptus as used in the printed versions of the Book of Abraham and the English form of the name of the country itself, Egypt. Ptah, whose name appears as the last element in the Egyptian form, was the creator god in the story told at the ancient city of Memphis. Zeptah, the form used originally by Joseph Smith, likely means son or daughter of Ptah. The Egyptian has it as, here I've written it as the masculine on the upper left-hand side there. You can see Sa rather than Sa'at, which would be the feminine. The feminine, however, later on dropped the T, so it's easier to pronounce it, and they both look alike, or both sound alike in later forms of Egyptian. But the Hebrew, if it has a Hebrew meaning, it would have been understood as Zeptah. This is Ptah. In other words, this is the god Ptah, or the discoverer of Egypt. Indeed, earlier Egyptologists translated the S as a Z, and so if we pronounce this as the Egyptian, if it pronounced it as Ze instead of Sa, that would fit with the way they used to transliterate it. I'll just skip over part of this here. As in most Hebrew words, the feminine suffix was often dropped in later forms of Egyptian. In the Egyptian text known as Astarte and the Sea, the goddess Astarte, corresponding to the Egyptian goddess Isis or Isis, is actually called Sa'at Ptah. In other words, the daughter of Ptah. So she has that very title. The Semitic verb Patah means to open, to discover. The Egyptians held that the temple at Memphis was constructed on the first piece of land rising from the floodwaters, and the same tradition was attached to various other spots where temples were built along the Nile. An Armenian text attributed to the 4th century AD Christian historian Eusebius declares that, quote, Egypt is called Mesraim by the Hebrews, which is close. In Hebrew it's Mitzrayim, but he came close considering that it was Greek translated into Armenian. And Mesraim lived not long after the flood. For after the flood, Ham, son of Noah, begat Aegyptus, or Mitzrayim, who was the first to set out to establish himself in Egypt at the time when the tribes began to disperse this way and that. Here we have Aegyptus then being a man. A similar account is found in Abraham chapter 1, verses 23 to 24, except that here it's a woman. The land of Egypt being the first discovered by a woman who was the daughter of Ham and the daughter of Aegyptus, which in the Chaldean signifies Egypt, which signifies that which is forbidden. When this woman discovered the land, it was under water, who afterwards settled her sons in it, and thus from Ham sprang that way. So I should make one point here before we move on, though, because somebody's probably going to look at this and then say, well, why is it that you said then, why does the book of Abraham say that it means forbidden in Chaldean? Well, my guess is that it's analogous to what happens in Russia. Does anybody know how the word Mormon is used in Russia? They heard about the Mormons in the United States, and these were bad people because all the books they ever had on it were anti-Mormon. We started sending missionaries to Russia, the Soviet Union almost, after 1989, These missionaries come in and they say, we're Mormons. And the people say, oh, you're those awful people. But other people in Russia have been called Mormons for some time. It's a group of evildoers, they say. And so they've used the term Mormon meaning evildoers instead of more good. If some of you like that better explanation, huh? Hugh Nibley has dealt with the Egyptian traditions about the goddess who discovered Egypt rising out of the floodwaters. In one text, she is called daughter of Ptah, which is noted above as one possible meaning of the name Zeptah. In some accounts, she is Isis, sister, wife to Osiris, both sister and wife, and mother of Horus, the first king of Egypt, making one wonder if Egyptus married her own brother, Mitzrayim, who was the son of Ham mentioned in the Bible, and after whom Egypt takes its name in Hebrew. Nibley draws attention to the account of Heraclides, which was unavailable to Joseph Smith, who wrote, "It was first a woman named Egyptia who established her son and introduced weaving. Because of her, the Egyptians set up an image of Athena, the Greek goddess, as Eporus says in his work on Europa." About 440 BC, the Greek historian Herodotus wrote that the Egyptian priest, quote, "told me that the first man who ruled over Egypt was Min, and that in his time all Egypt above the Thebaic Nome, that's Thebes, was a marsh, and another land below Lake Moeris, then showing itself above the surface of the water." In his chronicle, the 6th century AD Christian historian John Malalas wrote that, quote, "The first king of Egypt belonged to the tribe of Ham, Noah's son. He was Pharaoh, who was called Necho." While Malalas evidently confused the Pharaoh of Abraham's time with the Pharaoh Necho of the 6th century BC, the time of King Josiah, it is interesting that Abraham, chapter 1, verses 20 to 21, notes that Pharaoh signifies king by royal blood. Now this king of Egypt, he says, was a descendant of the loins of Ham and was a partaker of the blood of the Canaanites by birth. I have to keep looking for the little buttons and making sure. I don't see this here, by the way. It doesn't display on the computer up here, which is why I keep staring over there. So the only way I know if it's keeping up with me or vice versa. One of the Kirtland Egyptian papers notes that Abraham was, quote, "forewarned of God to go down into Amestra, or Egypt, and preach the gospel unto the Amestrans." The word may be related to the Hebrew Mitzrayim, sounds a bit like it, the name for Egypt and for one of Ham's sons, who is the eponymous ancestor of the Egyptians in Genesis chapter 10 and 1 Chronicles chapter 1. The Hebrew is actually a dual form, as reflected by the suffix ayim, so Mitzrayim really means two Egypts, if you will, due to the fact that ancient Egypt was considered to be comprised of two parts, Upper and Lower Egypt, that were subsequently united. Eusebius declared that Mitzrayim was indeed the founder of the Egyptian race, and from him the first Egyptian dynasty must be held to spring. As noted earlier, Eusebius also identified Egyptus with Mitzrayim. If, as the book of Abraham says, Egyptus was a daughter of Ham rather than a son, it is possible that she married her brother, just as the Egyptian traditions have. Isis marries her brother Osiris. And from them would derive the Hebrew name of Egypt. This would explain the Egyptian myths about Osiris, the god who actually ruled Egypt anciently, marrying his sister, and that was followed by some of the pharaohs. In fact, some of the pharaohs, in order to make sure that they were marrying into the royal line, married not only their sisters, but sometimes their daughters. And I know at least one case where one married his mother. It's really a strange idea from our point of view, but it was perfectly normal in their days. They wanted to preserve this particular line. The term Ralenos is found in Abraham chapter 1, verse 14, and indicates that it means hieroglyphics, referring to one of the writing systems used in ancient Egypt. The word hieroglyphos is Greek and means sacred or priestly writing. Perhaps it equates to Egyptian Ra-Nes, which would mean the tongue or speech of Ra, Ra being the Egyptian sun god and head of the pantheon in the city of On, or Heliopolis, sun city not Arizona, Egypt. I should apologize for those who know how Egyptian is written, but the fonts I used will not let me stack these properly, so you have to read it all the way across the line. And that's, I guess, probably only for John Gee, I don't know. The Egyptian N often corresponds to the Semitic L. The same is true also of the R. The Egyptian R is sometimes used for the Semitic L when it transliterates Semitic words, Hebrew, Canaanite, whatever. And in fact, sometimes the two are used together to denote an L. So when we look at Nes here from the Egyptian, it could easily be Las, Ras, any of those. Lashon, therefore, and Lisan, I believe to be cognate with the Egyptian word. On the surface, this Egyptian explanation does seem to fail because Abraham chapter 1, verse 14 says that the system of Egyptian characters, called figures in that passage, is called by the Chaldeans Ralenos, which signifies hieroglyphs. So, according to the book of Abraham, these are actually Chaldean. This is a Chaldean name, not the Egyptian name. But one of the manuscripts of the book of Abraham says it was called that by the Egyptians. And then the word Egyptian is crossed out and Chaldean is written above it. So it seems to me that originally it was perhaps intended to denote Egyptian. A number of Latter-day Saint scholars have taken in hand to provide ancient etymologies for the names of the Egyptian gods described in the book of Abraham. The earliest was Hugh Nibley, actually there were some who did it before him, followed in the late 1960s and early 1970s by Robert F. Smith, whose work, though mostly unpublished, has, in my opinion, stood the test of time. John Gee and others have more recently re-examined the names and come to similar conclusions. John M. Lundquist also noted that each of the gods or idols mentioned in Abraham 1:17 appears in the compilation of some 3,800 Mesopotamian deities published in 1950 by Anton Demel. Many of these names are Akkadian, a Semitic language related to Hebrew and more distantly to Egyptian. Critics often dismiss the four gods depicted below the lion couch, in facsimile 1 of the book of Abraham, as mere canopic jars in which the viscera of a deceased person were placed during the mummification process. They put the heart and the viscera and things in there. The only part of the body they threw away and did not mummify was the brain. They didn't know that's what made you think. In fact, they extracted the brain. They had a little hooked instrument they'd put up through the nostril, and they'd pull the brain out piece by piece. The procedure is very similar to abortion, by the way. Scary, huh? Well, at least if you're dead, you don't feel it. Well, it's true that these were canopic jars and that the various body parts were placed in them. These do depict the four gods known as the sons of Horus, though one text calls them the sons of Osiris. And indeed, in facsimile 2 figure 6, which I've had here in an insert, Joseph Smith describes them as representing this earth in its 4 quarters. Some of the sons of Horus were in fact associated with the Cardinal Directions, and we'll see this in our description of each of them. There was a kind of a strange thing going on in 1912 with the Reverend Spalding, who asked several Egyptologists to comment on this, and Samuel A.B. Mercer came back and he said, "Oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about, this Joseph Smith. These aren't the 4 quarters of the earth. These are the 4 cardinal directions, not quarters. It's a real difference." However, another Egyptologist, Budge, whom some of you have heard of also, he translated as quarters, 4 quarters instead of 4 cardinal directions. Well, let's look at each of them. The God whose name is rendered Elkanah in the published versions of Abraham, chapter 1, verses 6, 7, 13, 17, 20, and 29, appears with variant spellings in the Kirtland Egyptian papers. In 2 of the manuscripts, it is always spelled Elkanah, as, did I put it here? Yeah, the second way up at the top. This is also the spelling in another of the manuscripts, where it was changed later to Elkanah. That was manuscript 4. Just prior to publication, it was changed from Elkanah to Elkanah, and that was the version that went into the published. I'm going to skip past, you don't need to know all the details about which each manuscript says. Here's where we want to go, though. This, to me, suggests that Elkanah, it more closely approximates the way Joseph Smith intended to transliterate it. Robert F. Smith noted that the form Elkanah seems to correspond with the form of El Kuni Irtza, El, the maker of the earth, which is found in a Hittite text. It's actually a Canaanite title of the god El, but it's in a text about Asherah. It's also known in Phoenician title El Kene, probably, or Kone, whatever, Eretz, El, creator of the earth, together with the name Baal Shemayin, which means the Lord of heaven. So it parallels that in an 8th century manuscript from the Phoenician king Azitawada. The title clearly corresponds to the Hebrew El Elyon Kone, I can't read that, El Elyon Kone Shamayim Ba'aretz, which means the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth. It's translated possessor in the King James Version. That's from Genesis chapter 14, verse 19. And so the title has been around for a long time. Oh, I could have read it off there, couldn't I? It's a lot easier to read than it is here. The Hebrew name Elkanah is found in the Bible. It's a hyperchoristic form of the same name that we just mentioned, dropping off the ending element of it. The god El, head of the Canaanite pantheon, was identified by the Egyptians with the hawk-headed sun god Ra in their myth of Isis and Ra and Isis, rather, where he is also called Iripetta, maker of heaven and earth, the same title. The depiction labeled the idolatrous god of Elkanah in Abraham facsimile 1, figure 5, is the Egyptian jackal-headed god, who is associated with the east, where the sun rises. Indeed, the verb denoting the rising of the sun derives from this same root. John Lundquist has suggested another potential source of the name Elkanah, the Akkadian Dinger El-Gina. The Dinger part is just what we call a determinative. It derives from Sumerian, and it refers, oh, he's going to bring me something to read by. And it refers to divine names. You don't pronounce it, though, actually, but it is written. No, this is worse. Blue doesn't help. Yeah, bring me a red one. Red one's the one they use, in the fighters, pilots at night, and all that, and the submarines. I've seen TV. I know what they do. Anyways, so here we have the same kind of name. The El part at the beginning is the same as El. It means God also. And so his suggestion was that this was the origin of it, this Akkadian name. Nibley noted the report from Bar Hebraeus, a medieval Jewish scholar who became a Christian, that in the days of Abraham's father, Terach, the Egyptians adopted Chaldeism and made an image in honor of Kinos, the idol. Kinos may very well be related here to Elkanah. The god Libnah is mentioned in Abraham chapter 1, verses 6, 13, and 17. The god identified by this name in Abraham facsimile 1, figure 6 is the falcon-headed Egyptian god who is identified with the west. Another Egyptian god, the jackal-headed Inpur, we usually call him Anubis in English. No, I don't. No, I was just kidding. I was just kidding.
We have a white one too.
He's got a white one. Okay. Who brings these things to a conference? Hey, this works. Talk to yourselves while I'm finding my place. Okay. Okay. Anubis, who is the jackal god, who is called the Lord of the West, and also Lord of the White Land. Probably white because this word, Libna, comes from a word meaning white. The jackal is a nocturnal prowler. He goes out by moonlight to find his prey, and so is often associated with the moon. One of the Hebrew terms for moon, as we see here, is found in several Bible passages, 3 of them. It's Levana, the feminine form of Lavan, which you normally read as Laban, the brother of Rebekah in the Bible. The same term, Levana, meaning white or moon, is used in the medieval Hebrew story of Abraham to denote the moon that Abraham studied in his youth. In the Bible, Laban is one of Abraham's great nephews, while the form Laban, from the same roots, is a place name in records found at Ebla, near Abraham's homeland. The Bible also mentions a Canaanite city named Libnah, which is also mentioned on a list of cities conquered by the Egyptian king Thutmose III. So it's well attested that we have here a moon god, if you will. Deriving from the same root is the name Lebanon, Lebanon in Hebrew, which means white place, probably so called because of the snow that's atop Mount Lebanon. In the Zohar, a medieval Jewish text, citing the Song of Solomon in the Old Testament, says of Lebanon that it should be rewarded, Levana, thou moon who receivest thy light from the sun. Julius Levy considered Lebanon to derive from the Canaanite moon god Laban, while John Lundquist drew attention again to an Akkadian god, Laban, same name. These gods didn't change much from one country to the other when they spoke similar languages that were related. Michael Aviona noted the variant forms of the name of Lebanon. Lebanon in Hebrew, Libna in Phoenician, Labnanu in Assyrian, and Lablanu in Hittite. He could pronounce all those. Our next contestant, the god called Mamakara, I've assumed it's pronounced that way in the published version of the Book of Abraham, is depicted in Abraham Facsimile 1, figure 7. He's the baboon-headed god who represented the north, an element perhaps found in his name, because the word Mechtet means north. Is it possible that that's what we have at the beginning of this name? It is possible. The name used in the Book of Abraham, however, may be related to a Hebrew word, the word Mimkar, which means merchandise, since Egypt's principal trading partners were to the north. Closer in pronunciation, however, is the Akkadian divine name Mamihirat, which is in Demiel's list again, as quoted by Lundquist. Durham has actually, A. Richards Durham has actually proposed 2 possible etymologies that I have not included in this. And since I'm saying that now, maybe I should add that there are other possibilities. They're not included in today's presentation. I just didn't have enough time to get them all together. I expect I'll do that sometime in the near future. The god called Quraysh in the Book of Abraham, and depicted in Facsimile 1, figure 8, is a human-headed god who represents the south. It is possible that Quraysh, in fact, is from the Egyptian Karesi, which would mean spirit of the south. Nibley noted that the Egyptian goddess Hathor was worshipped in Saba. Today we call it Yemen, which in fact is a good Arabic Hebrew name meaning south. And that she was worshipped by the people of Quraysh. The Quraysh tribe is the tribe that gave birth to the Prophet Muhammad. And in fact, there is one tradition that the person who wanted to kill Abraham, one who wanted him to be actually slain for not worshiping the pagan gods, was a fellow named Quraysh. John Lundquist draws attention to another possibility, the Akkadian divine name Qurashur, and John Gia's note also that Kares, and I'm not sure if I spelled that one correctly, John, because I don't have it written down, but I remember you mentioning it, that this is attested in New Kingdom Egypt. Here's one of my favorites, Funny guy, funny name. The god Shagrael is mentioned only in Abraham 1:9, where he is said to be the sun. In this connection, one may perhaps compare the Egyptian hawk-headed god Sokar, who is a form of the sun, as depicted in Figure 4, facsimile 2, with the addition of the Semitic term El at the end. El meaning, of course, God. More likely, in my opinion, is Robert F. Smith's identification with the Canaanite Sha'arei El, the gates of El, the gates of God, a title of the Canaanite god Resheph, who in the Ugaritic text is called, in fact, Gate of the Sun. An Akkadian seal impression has Shamash, the sun god, rising between two mountains, on each side of which are hinged doors mounted by lions. The Egyptian Sokar is sometimes accompanied by a pair of lion guardians called Ruti. There, we see them here. That's the sun god rising between the mountains, between these two. Actually, they look more like, to me, they look more like cheetahs because they got spots, but the face is more like a lion. I think they have a lion's mane there. Anyway, the name Ruti means twin lions or twin gates. Twin lions guarding city gates were known amongst other ancient Near Eastern peoples, including the Hittites, who did a lot of that. And these later made their way into Western Europe and even into the United States, where today they flank the entrances of libraries, museums, and other public buildings. And, of course, in Salt Lake City, the human-headed lions that guard the entrance to the Masonic Temple. We should also compare the title Sha'arei with Shagrael, as we mispronounce it in English, with the name Sharia, which in fact means the gates of Jehovah, Yah in this case, where Yah is substituted for El. Sha'ariyah is in fact found in the Bible in 1 Chronicles chapter 8 verse 38 and chapter 9 verse 44. So the Hebrew form of the plural, which is not in those two passages, it has the singular there, would be Sha'arei. The Semitic name for gate is also known in Egypt, by the way, in later texts, because it was borrowed from Canaanite. Oh, Mars, you been there? The names of celestial bodies are found in the 3rd chapter of Abraham, in the explanation of facsimile 2, and in the Egyptian alphabet and grammar and other Kirtland Egyptian papers. The star named Kolob, and it's called a star. I know that there's some websites that say the Mormons are crazy. They think God lives on a planet called Kolob. The passage never says it's a planet, and never says God lives there either. It says it's closest to where he lives. Anyway, this star named Kolob is so called, quote, because it is near unto me, unquote, or, quote, near the residence or throne of God, unquote. Facsimile 2, figure 1 describes it as nearest to the celestial. This explanation is attractive because it creates a wordplay in the book of Abraham, a feature known from the underlying Hebrew of both the Old Testament and the Book of Mormon. The wordplay being, I didn't push the next one, did I? I'll get there now. The wordplay being between near and Kolob, because in fact the word for Kolob can mean near. There's several possibilities explained. I'm going to talk about those now. Yanesh Shodal was the first to compare the name with the Arabic qalb, core, marrow, heart, intelligence. However, because L and R often interchange in Semitic languages, one should also note Arabic qurb, proximity, near, midst, which is cognate to Hebrew qarov, near or close. Robert F. Smith prefers the latter and notes that it appears in the sense of near one as a title of God in Psalm 119, 151, where it parallels the word kedem, which means the primeval one or the ancient one. That's in verse 152, that word. Smith notes that the cognate Ugaritic kerub often refers to the dwelling place of El, the chief god in the Canaanite pantheon, in the expression midst of the source of the two deeps, where the word rendered midst is, in fact, this same word, qarab, meaning near. Another possible Hebrew etymology is Hebrew qalb, dog, originally pronounced qalb, just as it is in Arabic. This is used to denote the star Regulus in Arabic, while the Syriac, which is also qalb, denotes the star Sirius, the brightest star in the heavens. There's a wonderful article that Dan Peterson and John Gee and Matt Roper, I think, were the three who if I left something off that, you can fill it in later. But they wrote a really nice article on Kolob and its place in the sky and what it meant for Abraham. In Arabic, this term kalb, dog, also denotes the constellation of Canis Major, which is Latin meaning great dog. We call it the Big Dipper, but that's not what it was called anciently. As the brightest star in the constellation of the Great Big Dipper, Sirius is called Alpha Canis Majoris, which is number one big dog, top dog, I guess. Another name for the star is Canicula, a Latin word for little dog. Akkadian sources call Sirius Kalab Shamshi, the dog of the sun. In ancient Egypt, the Nile began to rise at the heliacal rising of Sirius. That is when it came up just before the sun, and bringing the annual torrent of Nile water laden with rich volcanic soil from the south and depositing it on the cultivated land. I should mention, by the way, you notice how the one has a Q, the other has a K? That's very important, at least in Arabic. It's not as important in Hebrew, but I always try to get my Hebrew students to pronounce the two differently. In Israel, they pronounce the two just that. It's just like a regular K in English. But in ancient times, they were pronounced quite differently. One is pronounced way in the back of the throat, the other is pronounced farther up. And in Arabic, they make a big distinction. And my reasoning with my students was, if you don't make the distinction and you speak in Arabic and you want to tell a girl, I love you with all of my heart, which is the word that's coming up next, you don't want to end up saying, I love you with all of my dog. I think that struck a note with most of them, yeah. So, this is the other one I wanted to have. Qalb, which is heart in Arabic. There are some Egyptian equivalents to that. I didn't put them up here. There's a couple of cognates that are related directly to that. In the Sumerian text, known as the Descent of Inanna, one of the more ancient texts from the Middle East, the goddess Inanna goes down into the underworld to free her husband Dumuzi, who is the god who brings rain during the season of rain. And on the way back to heaven, she stops at a place called Kulab, which is designated as a tree of some sort. We don't know why this happens there, but there Dumuzi gets to sit on his throne and puts on his royal apparel, which he has not been wearing while he's been imprisoned. The term Olea is used to denote the moon in Abraham 3:13. It resembles the Hebrew term Yareach, which is just one of two words meaning moon or month. Even in English, month comes from the word moon, by the way, as does Monday, Moon's Day. The Egyptian word for moon is Yah, which is cognate to the Semitic term. In fact, similarly to figure 1, the moon's name is given differently, however. It's called Floese, or however you pronounce that, Flois. I'm not sure. This name is similar to the Kli Flos Ises that we find in some of the Kirtland Egyptian papers. Kli makes a lot of sense. Kli is a good Hebrew word. It means a vessel in the sense of a plate or bowl or even spoon, or a tool of any kind, a hammer or whatever. Can be that. And the word looks like it's finishing in the name of the Greek goddess, or the Greek form, I should say, of the Egyptian goddess Isis. And I have no clue what flos is supposed to mean, unless any dentist here could explain that to us. The second one as well, I don't have a clue on that one. But we've got some starts here, so somebody research that one, okay, give us a report next year. Shinnah is an interesting one. Abraham 3:13 calls the son Shinnah, which seems to be related to the Hebrew word Shana, which means year. The year is defined by the annual circuit of the earth about the sun, and to the ancients was determined by where the sun rose each day during the year. The Semitic verbal form means to change, that is to change seasons and other changes, or to repeat, and is the source of the numeral 2, because you start over. Once you finish the cycle, you start it over again, so there's a second cycle. The Egyptian cognate is the verb sheni, which is to encircle, to enclose, or surround, and the noun from that is shanu, which means circuit or circumference. From this also we get the name of the ring, shen, which is depicted with the little, I don't think I did that one up there, did I? Nope, I didn't. Sorry, you won't see that one. Hugh Nibley, followed by Robert F. Smith and Carrie Schertz, have suggested that the name Shinnah derives from the Egyptian term plus the Egyptian word chech or nechech, meaning eternity or eternal. And so that would be then the eternal circuit, or as Nibley put it, one eternal round, which book we hope to see soon. Yane Shodal suggested that the name Olaha Shinnah, mentioned in Doctrine and Covenants section 117.8 from July 8, 1838, is related to the terms for moon, Olea, which we saw a moment ago, and Shinnah for the sun. These were used as code words in early days of the church, beginning with the first Doctrine and Covenants in 1835. There are several other terms that are related to the sun in the Book of Abraham materials, and I just don't have time to go into all of those, and they're not as certain as some of these that I'm looking at. The explanation of facsimile 2, figure 12 reads, and I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Rakia, not Raukiyang. The spelling there came from Joseph Smith's association with his Hebrew teacher, Joshua Seixas, who transliterated things in this way, but anybody who knows that transliteration method knows how the Hebrew word is actually spelled. Anyways, the explanation reads, Rakia, signifying expanse or firmament over our heads, but in this case, in relation to this subject, the Egyptians meant it to signify shama, to be high, or the heavens, answering to the Hebrew word shamayim, which is a dual form, two heavens. This Hebrew word, rakia, does in fact mean expanse. We get the term firmament by a mistake that was made by St. Jerome when he was translating the Bible into Latin, and he spelled it he translated it firmamentum, and so it came across that way in later times too. It's true that the verb rakah can mean to hammer out a sheet of metal like gold and make it a thin sheet, but it can mean actually to expand in other ways as well. The normal Hebrew word for heaven or sky is actually a dual form, shamayim, which Joseph Smith here transliterated, as you can see up at the very top in the yellow. The Arabic cognate is in the singular. It's sama, as is the Akkadian shamu. It's in the singular. Hebrew is the only one that has it in this dual, as far as I know. Mitchell Dahoud, a very well-known scholar now deceased from the Pontifical Biblical Institute, probably the only Arab who ever was associated with that group, actually proposed that for Psalm 68:4, that instead of reading Shemo, which would mean his name, the word should read Shamau, which would be the heaven in a singular form. I used to have this picture that you see in the background on my computer, and they were all coming right at you, like Captain Kirk's ship going through all those stars. And I had this floating message that would go all around my screen and make it look kind of mysterious, and it said, "To boldly go where no man and only one or two women have ever gone before. Abraham 3:13 defines kochav, which is the correct Hebrew pronunciation, as star, and kochavim as stars, or all the great lights which were in the firmament of heaven. When first published in the Times and Seasons, the passage read kolob in error. They'd written kolob so many times that the typesetter thought that's what belonged here. The manuscripts, however, have kochav corresponding to the Hebrew word that we have written here, and denotes in the one the singular and the other in the plural. The plural is also found two other times in the book of Abraham, and it's called in facsimile 2 figure 5, and also Abraham 3:16. It lists ha-kokhavim, or ha-kochavim in Hebrew, the correct pronunciation. The ha means the, so it's the stars. Lundquist noted that one of the deities in Daniel's list was Kachov, meaning star. Similar, Kakab is the name of one of the gods mentioned in the Ebla records discovered in northwestern Syria. Kavanrash, that's an interesting one. I'm still scratching my head over parts of this. Facsimile number 2, figure 5, we read about Kavanrash, which is the grand key, or in other words, the governing power which governs 15 other fixed planets or stars, as also Floyes, the moon, the earth, and the sun in their annual revolutions. The element Ka may here be the Egyptian word Ka, which we saw earlier, meaning spirit. And the element Rash at the end looks very much to me like it's the Semitic term. In Hebrew, Rosh, but in Arabic, Rash and Rash, or rather not Rash, or Ras and Ra'as. It doesn't have the sh, it has a s sound for the cognates in Arabic. And that word means head or chief. And so I'm suspecting that that's what's going on here. Now, if I can only figure out what this is in the middle, so if any of you have suggestions, send me email. The Book of Abraham and associated Egyptian papers mention names of specific individuals whom Abraham evidently encountered during his brief sojourn in Egypt. Some of them, such as Shulem and Olimla, are listed in the explanation of facsimile 3, while others are found in the Abraham text or other texts associated therewith. I'm not going to go into all those names, however. I'd like to give some ideas on this one. Abraham 1:11 describes Onita as one of the royal descent directly from the loins of Ham, whose 3 daughters were sacrificed because they would not worship the Egyptian gods. The name may be the same as Onitos and Onitas in the Valuable Discovery Notebook, where there's an S at the end instead of the H. There he is said to have been king of Egypt, while the chapter 1 of Abraham says he was of the royal descent. It may correspond to the name Winis, or usually pronounced Unas, by those who transliterate it from the Egyptian. He was a pharaoh of the 5th dynasty of Egypt. He is not our man, however, because Unas lived long before Abraham's time. He lived a few centuries before that. But and there is an Egyptian text that indicates that the pharaoh Unas ate the boiled body parts of gods, by which most Egyptologists assumed that it means he was a cannibal. He was eating not gods, but humans. And if that be the case, it does make it look a little suspicious that this is the guy in whose day his daughters are being offered in sacrifice. 2 related Egyptian terms may give us clues about the meaning of the name Unas. The first is Wenut, up there in the upper left, meaning priesthood, and the second, Wenueti, meaning astronomer, both of which play an important role in the Book of Abraham, which describes Abraham's teachings of astronomy to the Egyptians and the rival claims of Abraham and Pharaoh to patriarchal priesthood authority. Oh, that's not the one we want. There we go. My wife said, "Don't show them that one." And I said, "I'll get a great laugh from that one." Any of you guys in the back were sleeping and you want to see it again? The name Katumin, Also appears in the valuable Discovery Notebook. And the first passage reads, Katamin, princess, daughter of Onitas, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who began to reign in the year of the world 2962. The second reads, Katamin was born in the 30th year of the reign of her father and died when she was 28 years old, which was the year 3020. I'm presuming she was sacrificed, but the text doesn't say that. It also appears in the form of Katumun as an alternative. It may derive from the Egyptian Katamin, which would be the spirit of the land of Min. Min was one of the Egyptian gods. He was a fertility god, in fact, closely associated with the land. Various classical writers claim that the first king of Egypt was named Menes, and that name has often been tied in with the name of the god Min. A few specific places are named in the Book of Abraham and associated Kirtland Egyptian papers. Of these, Egypt and Ur of the Chaldees are also known from the biblical account of the life of Abraham. Here we'll look at two important place names associated with Abraham that are not in the Bible. Because neither place is in Egypt, these names are not derived from the Egyptian language. The plain of Olishem is named in Abraham chapter 1, verse 10, as the place in Ur of the Chaldees where the Egyptians had erected an altar on which they sacrificed human beings. John L. Lundquist has noted that the name is attested in a record of Naram Sin, a 23rd century BC king of Akkad, as Ulisum, and is listed with the Amana Mountains and the city Ebla in northwest Syria, not far from Abraham's homeland. Akkadian and Hebrew are both part of the Semitic language family, by the way, and the exchange between the O and U is well attested in Semitic languages. Here's the one I kind of like. Chalcedoniash. The name Chalcedoniash is spelled in various ways in the Kirtland Egyptian papers. In one, it appears as Chalcedon Hish and is identified as the land of the Chaldeans. This meaning is also given in another of the texts where it is spelled as Za-Kie-On Hiash and also Kal-Sidon Hiash. It appears as in other spelling forms as well in those documents. The ending Yash is interesting to me. It is known from the name of the Kassite god Shuryash and the names of some of the Kassite kings of Babylon, Kashtilash, Kara Indash, Bornaburiash. The Kassites controlled Mesopotamia during the 17th century BC. This, of course, postdates the time of Abraham. He was 20th century BC. But it's hard to ignore the fact that the Kassites called Mesopotamia Kar-Duniash, which closely resembles the name found in the Kirtland Egyptian papers, with the interchange of the L and the R again, which are common between Semitic languages and those in the broader language family, which includes Egyptian, called Afroasiatic. A Falasha text called Ta'azazat Sanbat, the commandment of the Sabbath. Falasha, by the way, those are the black Jews of Ethiopia. In describing Nimrod's attempt to kill Abraham because he would not worship the idols, noted regarding the furnace into which he was tossed, from that day until today it is called Kaladawan, which sounds very much like these two. Not identical, but it's similar. The name is evidently to be tied to the Akkadian term Kaldu, a people identified with the biblical Chaldeans, or Kasdim in Hebrew, in whose land Abraham lived at the time he was brought for sacrifice. According to the conflict of Adam and Eve, an early Christian text, among the Magi who came to visit the newborn Jesus, one account names Kar-Sundas, king of the east. I have his name at the bottom of the list, but look how closely it corresponds to the others. There's something below the surface here, and I'm not quite sure what it is, but we'll continue to work on it. As we have seen, many of the names, wasn't supposed to do that till I push. What did you do to me? Okay. Well, I don't care. As we've seen, many of the names associated with the Book of Abraham and related documents have valid ancient etymologies. To be sure, there remain unanswered questions, particularly about the so-called alphabet and grammar, but it is hard to ignore the hits in the Book of Abraham. The number of names that are authentically ancient far outnumber those for which we cannot at present establish an etymology, making coincidence an improbable explanation. That holds for the names, not necessarily for the words that are found, for example, in the grammar materials. I'm ready for the questions. I wore out this battery.
We got one, and we got it early on. So
You got one. Is it an authentic Chaldean word, and if so, does it mean hieroglyphics? As far as I know, it is not Chaldean, and the term Chaldean is rather confusing anyway. In Joseph Smith's day, the term Chaldean usually referred to Aramaic. Some of the books of the Old Testament are in Aramaic rather than in Hebrew, and some are part Hebrew and part Aramaic. Daniel, for example, beginning with chapter 2, verse 5, I think it is, and all the way through to the end of chapter 7 is all, or no, chapter 6 is all in Aramaic. The rest of it's in Hebrew. So does it mean that Chaldean, or does it mean Chaldean, the language that was spoken by the people we call Chaldeans? Hard to say, because those people spoke Akkadian. That's what we call it, at least. I don't know what they called it, but the question isn't phrased in such a way to really give it a good answer. But as I did mention, the original manuscript does say, called that in Egyptian. And as I said, I don't think it has anything to do with it meaning specifically that in Chaldean, whatever that is, but it does make sense if it is the language of God, which would be hieroglyphics, the language of the priests. Same thing as far as I can see. You want that back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you much.
Only one question, huh? I'll take the short guy.